There are many old towns scattered throughout Victoria, and many of them associated with the most precious metal of all, gold. But not all towns can lay claim to the fact that they were the first to publicly announce the discovery of gold in Victoria. That privilege belongs to Clunes, its rich history playing an important part in the development of Victoria. In the early 1800s, vast plains and forests of Victoria were virtually unexplored and unspoiled by European migration. Aboriginals scattered throughout the country were unaware of what lay under the surface of the land that would make white men travel halfway round the world to take possession of the most valued metal of all, gold. But before gold was discovered in Australia, the land was crossed by settlers, farmers and sheep herders. One such man was Donald Cameron. In 1839, Donald Cameron, then aged 21, and his uncle Dougal brought their flock of sheep 600 miles from Sydney, heading for Portland Bay. On passing through this district, both men decided to settle in this valley, which Donald Cameron named Clunes, after his home in Scotland. This was the site where Donald Cameron set up his homestead by the creek on the southwest corner of North Clunes Hill, and this part is still known as Station Flat. In 1847, his uncle Dougal took up land about 15 kilometres to the east, and that place was named after himself. It was called Mount Cameron. It covered 32,000 acres and carried 15,000 sheep and cattle. But these quiet surroundings were soon to be changed. There were many rumours that gold had been found in the area by shepherds. Squatters suppressed the evidence to keep the valley as a quiet farming district. But soon after quartz reefs on the Cameron station were found to contain gold, many other deposits were found in the area. When Victoria became a colony, a reward of £210 was offered for the discovery of gold. This was put up by a group of Melbourne businessmen to encourage people to stay in the new colony. Among those pioneers who came to Clunes was James Esmond, who in 1849 travelled to the Californian goldfields. He soon realised that the geological structure of the land was similar to that of the Clunes district. In a short time he returned to Australia and commenced his search for gold at Clunes. This is the site that James Esmond discovered gold in 1851 after coming from the Californian goldfields. After mining samples of quartz, he journeyed to Geelong to report his discovery. On reaching there on the 5th of July 1851, his news was received with great enthusiasm, which was published in the Geelong Advertiser on the 7th of July 1851. James Esmond returned here to Clunes with his partner James Pugh and commenced mining. People rushed to the small town and began mining generally in a primitive and hard labouring search. Due to this gold discovery in Clunes, it was only a matter of days before gold was being discovered in other towns in Victoria, and the rush for gold was truly on. What you see behind me was the site of the Port Phillip Mining Company, which commenced its operations in 1857, and until that date, mining was on a much smaller scale. In February of that year, a lease was drawn up with the owners of the land to give the company the right to mine for 21 years. The owners to receive 10% of all gold mined. Mr. C.J. Harvey was the first manager of one of the largest mines at Clunes. It alone extracted over 514,000 ounces of gold. Within 40 years, Clunes mines extracted an incredible 50 tonnes of gold, which was then valued at over £5 million. To the shareholders' delight, the company's endeavour to extract gold was a thriving success. We asked Greg Downs, present owner of the Port Phillip mine site, a few questions about the mines.
Now obviously, Greg, there was a lot of water here because a lot of it would have been used in the mining of gold. Perhaps you can tell us something about that?
Well, actually, once the Port Phillip, they sunk deep enough, they could drain all the country, you see, and they really, people say there was a lot of water, you see. Well, there wasn't. They brought a water scheme in from out at Newland to supply their batteries needs and other things around the mining area. And we use that water scheme now in our local local water.
So that originally was brought in by Port Phillip?
Yeah.
And they would have used a lot of water?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Once they get down and drain the country, there wasn't that much water. But surface water, there was always a good water in the stream, in the local creek there, Tullaroop Creek.
Yeah. I believe there were quite a lot of men used to work along this creek, aren't there?
Oh yes, after the Port Phillip closed, there was anything up to, I've heard my dad say there was anything up to 300 or 400 men along that flat, working shallow after the alluvial.
Up to 1857, Clunes was a town of tents. Beyond that time, the town began to grow rapidly. There was plenty of work for everyone and the mines were paying well. By 1861, Clunes had its own council and 5 schools. The first elected mayor was Charles Tyler Sutherland. In 5 weeks, the population increased by over 2,500, and by this stage, there were 7 quartz mines in operation. What was the position of the independent miners as compared with the men employed by the large mining companies?
Yeah, they're a different fella again, you see. He'd sink his little shaft. They sort of get to know where the shallow sinking is, not too deep, 6 to 8 feet probably at the most, and they get down and get these little washes, like huggy, and the gold catches in that, you see, in little gutters. Well, they get that, they'd sink their shaft in, and some of them good fellas might dig 2 a day. Get that out, you dig one here, I dig one there. And well, in some places it's payable, others it's not. But from the battery here alone, it was on record that they lost 4 to 5 pennyweights to a ton of oil that was crushed. Well, you see, that all went down the creek, washed away in the creek, catches in the crevices and in any old bits of holes and that. Well, a lot of them, good cunning fellas, they knew that, and that's where they were after.
Get that out.
Yeah, and then there was cyanide. There was 3 or 4 fellas had cyanide. They treated the sands from the battery. That paid well because they knew it was on record that they were losing this. It was fairly crude sort of a battery. It wasn't anything like any up to date.
In Fraser Street, the past is still remembered, as many of the historical buildings are still standing. When the town was thriving in the 1870s, there were 63 businesses and at least 23 hotels in Fraser Street alone. The town was also subject to hard times when Fraser Street was engulfed by the Great Fire of 1869, destroying 8 shops. The fire occurred Friday night and was followed on Saturday by a flood from Tullarook Creek. The floodwaters were recorded at 8 feet, damaging many shop goods that were salvaged from the fire. The town and its surrounding district have been protected for many years by the dedicated men from the local fire brigade. The Clunes Fire Brigade was awarded this beautiful trophy, presented to them in 1862 for district competition. Today there are only two hotels in the town, the Club Hotel and the National, typical of many hotels that once served as watering holes and boarding houses to the miners. There was the Bull and Mouth Hotel, which was known for its large concert hall. From this sketch we can see the domed roof of the hotel. The building was also used as a changing house for Cobb and Co coaches.
Obviously at this period too there must have been quite a lot of hotels and
Yes,
tell us.
I think there's 65, might have been more. There's nearly a hotel on every corner.
Yeah.
My dad used to tell me about his father had sent him to get a billy of beer. Well, that was just down the road, you see. Get a billy of beer for sixpence. That would be 5 cents today.
Yeah.
And the publican, he had a bucket there for the silver and a bucket for the gold. Sovereigns and silver, that was all the currency.
Yeah.
Well, when that hotel was pulled down, the old floorboards had a lot of cracks in them, and well, there was quite a scramble.
Yeah.
The fellas getting an odd sovereign or two, or half sovereign.
It was common to see as many as 20 bullock and horse teams daily passing through Fraser Street, the drays loaded with wood to be used for the furnaces of the Port Phillip Mining Company.
The ore, the quartz that was mined from the Port Phillip was very hard. It just knocked the stamp heads about on the battery, you see. So they had that bin there at the back. They'd fill that up with the quartz, fire these furnaces, and they'd create the stone to go sugary and brittle and easy to crush. There's two here and two further over, you see. It was one way of...
Was all the quartz treated like the same part of it?
Well, I think most of it was very hard. At first they probably crushed a lot with just before doing this, and they found out that this was one way of getting it soft.
Poppet heads like this one at Majorca were once a common sight in Clunes. Clunes mines were among the deepest operating in Victoria, being worked at depths of 90 to over 1,000 feet below the surface. An unusual chimney at the Port Phillip mine was built lying down on the side of the hill. This was to enable the mercury and acid fumes to escape. No doubt gold was found in other parts of the state, but this letter confirms the fact that Clunes has been officially acknowledged by the Mines Department as the site of the first gold discovery in Victoria. The mines were well established in the 70s and paying well, but the miners were after more than gold. The men working on the Lothair mine requested to cease work on Saturday afternoon, as this had been granted to men working on other mines. The director of the mine refused and the men went on strike. 3 months had passed and there was still no agreement between the two parties. There were rumours that Chinese workers would be brought in. The strikers retaliated and destroyed shelters that were built for the Chinese. The director sought fit to bring in Chinese workers from Ballarat and Creswick mines. On the 9th of December 1873, coach loads were on their way, and news of their coming reached Clunes. It was here on the Creswick Road that the Chinese workers, accompanied by police, made their way towards Clunes, only to be confronted by the striking miners and the hostile townsfolk. After advice from the police, the Chinese turned back to proceed across country towards Ballarat. The coaches circled round and headed down the Ballarat Road. Anticipating this, large crowds had gathered, barricading the road off with carts and ploughs and greeting them with stones and other missiles. The strikers, determined to stop them, turned the coaches round. For fear of more violence, Sergeant Lana persuaded those in charge to return the Chinese to their own camps. The miners had won their fight for less hours. Miners called on a manager, suggesting he leave on the evening train. He took their advice. By the 1880s, the town was giving employment to many families. Clunes possessed 3 foundries, a gasworks and several brickmaking yards. With family life more prevalent, a number of churches were built. Some quite large and elegant buildings, which have lasted the test of time, are still used today. This building goes back as far as 1860, when, to the best of our knowledge, it was prefabricated in England and shipped out to Australia, where it was assembled first in Fraser Street and at the site of the RSL Hall. It was previously the ES&A Bank, and before that the London Chartered Bank. St Paul's Church of England was built in 1871. The foundations of this bluestone church were laid in 1870 by the Reverend John Herring. When this church was originally built, it extended only one window beyond this door. It was not until 1888 that this building was extended to its present length. Although the men who built this church have long since passed away, their fine craftsmanship is still present today to be admired by many generations to come. We've had a careful look at the outside of this church, reminiscent of many of the churches built in this period, when Australians were first settling this country. As the town progressed, so did the buildings. The town hall was designed by Ballarat architect P. Octon. The official opening was in May 1873, performed by the then Governor of Victoria, Sir George F. Bowen. Clunes gold mine ceased operating in 1893 due to the fact that payable quartz was becoming more scarce. It was necessary to mine deeper, but to accomplish this, more powerful water pumps were needed. It was decided by the directors and shareholders that it was not a profitable proposition and the mines were closed. With rich gold finds reported in Western Australia, investors diverted their money to the west. By the turn of the century, Clunes' population dropped dramatically. With the gold era past, the town turned to agriculture and other industries. This reunion was taken in front of the South Clunes School, which was converted into a knitting mill in 1938, the third mill since 1919. Two world wars also added to the decline in the town's population. When the war ended, a great many of the returned soldiers settled and looked for work in more flourishing towns of the period. The sounds of the football crowds today is a far cry from the pounding of the mine batteries which once echoed through the valley. As Donald Cameron was attracted to the district, so too are people of today. What was once grazing land is now making way for new homes. Donald Cameron wrote to his brother in Scotland on the 26th of July 1840. It reads as follows. I find the carpenter tools I brought out with me very useful. Should I live to go home, I will most likely bring them back with me. Donald Cameron sold his property in 1856 and returned to Scotland. But he did not realise then that his sheep station would become one of the richest gold fields in the world.